The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Thorn Global boardroom, but the atmosphere inside was much colder than the storm outside. Elias Thorn, the ruthless CEO who had doubled his family wealth in less than 5 years, stared down the long mahogany table. His board of directors looked back at him with nervous anticipation, all except Victor Vance. Victor leaned back in his leather chair, a smug smile playing on his lips, as he tossed a stack of morning newspapers onto the polished wood. The headlines were identical across every publication. They painted Elias as the Ice King of Wall Street, a heartless corporate raider who had just evicted a beloved local orphanage to build a new luxury high-rise. "You have an image problem, Elias," Victor said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "The shareholders are panicking. The merger with the European conglomerate is hanging by a thread because they do not want to associate with a man the public considers a monster. If you cannot soften your image by the end of the month, the board will have no choice but to vote for a change in leadership." Elias clenched his jaw, though his expression remained perfectly blank. He knew Victor had leaked the story. Victor had been trying to steal the CEO position for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Elias stood up, buttoning his tailored suit jacket with slow, deliberate precision. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "I will handle the public relations issue, Victor. Just make sure your own house is in order before you try to burn down mine." Without waiting for a response, Elias walked out of the boardroom. The tension radiating from him parted the sea of employees in the hallway as he made his way to the private elevator. He needed a strategy. He needed to prove to the public and his investors that he possessed a bleeding heart, a concept he found entirely ridiculous. When Elias stepped out of the glass doors of his corporate headquarters, a blinding flash of camera bulbs exploded in his face. The paparazzi had camped outside, shouting questions about the eviction and his lack of humanity. His security detail immediately stepped forward to clear a path to his waiting town car, pushing through the crowd. Elias kept his head high, ignoring the shouting reporters, but as he reached the curb, his sharp eyes caught a detail that broke his iron focus. Sitting on a damp cardboard box over a subway grate, completely ignoring the chaos of the press, was a young woman. She was shivering in a worn, oversized coat, her dark hair plastered to her cheeks by the rain. But what caught Elias off guard was not her poverty. It was her posture. She sat with a rigid, undeniable dignity, and her eyes were fixed on a thick, waterlogged book about macroeconomics. Elias stopped. The flashing cameras continued behind him. His mind, always calculating, saw an opportunity. An impromptu act of extreme charity caught on camera. It was exactly the kind of pathetic, heartwarming garbage the media loved. He signaled his head of security to wait, turned around, and walked directly toward the homeless woman. The reporters went silent, their cameras rolling as the billionaire knelt down slightly, uncaring that the wet pavement was ruining his expensive trousers. He looked at the woman, expecting her to shrink back or ask for spare change. Instead, she slowly closed her book and met his gaze. Her eyes were striking, a piercing shade of hazel that held no fear, only a cold, guarded intelligence. "You look like you could use a warm meal and a steady paycheck," Elias said, pitching his voice so the closest microphones could pick it up. "Come inside. I am offering you a job at Thorn Global." The paparazzi erupted into a frenzy of questions. Elias offered his hand, waiting for the woman to weep with gratitude and take it. But she just stared at his extended hand, and then looked up at his face. She did not smile. "You look like you are trying to buy a soul to replace the one you are missing," she replied. Her voice was quiet but steady, cutting through the noise of the rain and the reporters. Elias felt a sharp jolt of surprise. No one spoke to him like that, especially not someone sleeping on the street. He lowered his voice so only she could hear. "I am offering you a way off this sidewalk. Take the hand, smile for the cameras, and I will give you a job that pays more than you have ever seen. Or you can sit here and freeze to protect your pride." Clara Hayes looked at the billionaire. She recognized him, of course. Everyone knew the face of Elias Thorn, but Clara knew things about his empire that the public did not. She looked at the flashing cameras, then back at his hand. Slowly, with a grace that seemed entirely out of place on the damp street, She reached out and took his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," Clara said, her tone perfectly polite but entirely hollow. "I accept your generous offer." By the next morning, the narrative had shifted entirely. Elias Thorne was no longer the ruthless evictor. He was the billionaire savior who had pulled a destitute woman from the gutters of New York. Victor Vance was furious, but Elias was satisfied. He placed Clara in a low-level clerical position in the corporate archives, assuming she would quietly collect a paycheck and disappear into the background while he reaped the good publicity. But Clara Hayes was not someone who disappeared. On her third day, Elias received an urgent call from his chief financial officer. There was a problem in the archives. When Elias marched down to the basement level, expecting to find that his charity case had stolen office supplies, he instead found Clara standing in front of a whiteboard, calmly correcting a catastrophic flaw in a quarterly projection report. 3 senior analysts were standing around her, looking completely embarrassed. Elias dismissed the analysts with a wave of his hand and closed the glass door. He looked at the whiteboard, then at Clara, who was casually wiping dry erase marker from her fingers. Where did a woman sleeping on a subway grate learn to spot a hidden deficit in a corporate merger projection? Elias asked, his voice low and suspicious. Clara did not flinch. "Libraries are free, Mr. Thorne, and numbers do not lie." Unlike people in expensive suits, Elias stepped closer, realizing for the first time how beautiful she was now, that she was warm, rested, and wearing clean, professional clothes. She did not back away. She held her ground, looking at him with that same challenging defiance she had shown on the street. He realized then that Clara was not just a prop for his public relations campaign. She was brilliant, and she was hiding something. Later that evening, Victor Vance made his next move. During a hastily called board meeting, Victor pointed out that a single day of charity was not enough to secure the European merger. The investors wanted proof that Elias had truly changed, that he was capable of human connection and stability. Victor proposed a motion to freeze the merger until Elias could demonstrate personal stability, perhaps a serious relationship, something the playboy billionaire had famously avoided. Elias saw the trap closing. If he lost the merger, Victor would have the votes to take the company. Elias needed a miracle. He needed a partner who was entirely under his control, someone the public already loved, someone who owed him everything. He left the meeting and went straight down to the archives. Clara was packing her bag to leave for the evening. Elias locked the door behind him and slapped a thick legal document on her desk. "You are no longer an archive clerk," Elias said, leaning over the desk to invade her space. "You are going to be my fiancée." Clara looked at the document, then up at him, raising a single eyebrow. "Is this how you usually propose, or am I getting special treatment?" "I need a respectable partner for the next 6 months to secure a merger and push a traitor off my board," Elias explained, his tone strictly business. "The media already loves the narrative of the billionaire and the girl he saved. We give them a romance. You sign a non-disclosure agreement, you attend events on my arm, you smile, and you pretend I am the love of your life. In return, I will pay you $2 million when the contract expires." Clara stared at the contract. $2 million. It was enough to change a life. It was enough to fund a war. She reached out and touched the edge of the paper. "You want to buy me to save your company." "I'm offering a business transaction," Elias corrected softly. "You have nothing to lose, Clara." Clara picked up a pen. She looked into Elias Thorne's cold eyes, seeing the arrogance of a man who believed money could fix any problem and bury any mistake. He thought he was using her as a pawn in his corporate game. He had absolutely no idea that she had been waiting for a way into his inner circle. "I will do it," Clara said smoothly, bringing the pen down to the paper. "But we play by my rules in public. You do not control me, Elias." Elias smiled, a dangerous, predatory smile. "We will see about that." Clara signed her name on the dotted line. Clara Hayes. Elias took the contract, satisfied that he had won. He did not know that 20 years ago, his father had ruthlessly destroyed a company called Hayes Financial, driving its founder to an early grave and leaving his family with nothing. He did not know that the homeless woman he just tied to his side was the heir to the family he had ruined. And he did not know that Clara had not just signed a marriage contract. She had just signed his death warrant. The transition into the penthouse of Elias Thorne was as cold as the contract that bound them together. Clara arrived with nothing but a small canvas bag, refusing the army of stylists and personal shoppers Elias had assembled in the marble foyer. When he presented her with a black velvet box containing a diamond engagement ring large enough to blind a bystander, Clara did not gasp in awe. She looked at the jewel, then up at Elias, and calmly stated that she would wear it for the cameras, but she would not let him dress her like a lifeless mannequin. Elias felt a strange tightening in his chest. He was used to women who wanted his money, not women who treated his wealth as an inconvenience. Their first public appearance was a charity gala, hosted by Victor Vance. The ballroom was a sea of silk and expensive champagne, and Clara navigated it with a sharp, effortless grace that left the elite society whispering in confusion. She did not stumble over her words or hide behind Elias. When Victor approached them, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent, he tried to humiliate Clara by asking which soup kitchen she preferred. Clara simply smiled, her voice carrying over the music as she dissected Victor and his recent failed investments with surgical precision, leaving him speechless and red in the face. Elias watched her, entirely captivated. For the first time in his life, he was not the most dangerous person in the room. She was. Late that night, after returning to the penthouse, the adrenaline faded, leaving a heavy, crackling tension between them. Elias poured 2 glasses of scotch and handed one to Clara, who was staring out at the city skyline. He expected her to go to her separate bedroom, but instead, she stayed. They argued over the mechanics of the merger, their words sharp and laced with an undeniable electric pull. When Elias reached out to brush a stray lock of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her warm skin, the air in the room vanished. It was a moment of dangerous vulnerability. He pulled back quickly, his pride warring with a sudden terrifying realization that he was actually starting to care for her. But the fragile truce shattered 3 days later. Elias was in his private study, reviewing the background checks his security team had finally completed on Clara. He had ordered the investigation as a standard precaution, expecting to find minor debts or a troubled past. Instead, he found a ghost. He stared at the digital files, the blood draining from his face. Clara Hayes, daughter of Arthur Hayes, the founder of Hayes Financial, the same Arthur Hayes whose company was aggressively dismantled by the father of Elias 20 years ago, leaving her family destitute. When Clara walked into the study, the silence was suffocating. Elias slowly turned the monitor toward her. The digital file illuminated her face in the dark room. He did not yell. His voice was a deadly quiet whisper when he asked if she had planned to destroy him from the very beginning. Clara looked at the screen, her expression hardening into stone. She did not deny it. She told him that she had watched his father rip her family apart, and she had promised herself she would see the Thorne Empire crumble. But her voice broke on the final word, betraying the conflicting emotions warring inside her. She turned and walked out, leaving Elias standing alone in the ruins of their contract. For a week, the penthouse became a battlefield of absolute silence. They attended their scheduled public events, smiling for the cameras, playing the perfect couple, but behind closed doors they did not speak a single word. Elias felt a hollow, agonizing ache in his chest every time he looked at her. He tried to bridge the gap with quiet, unnoticed gestures. When she stayed up late working on the archive files, he would quietly leave a cup of black coffee on her desk, brewed exactly the way she liked it, without saying a word. He cancelled a vital dinner with foreign investors just to sit in the same room while she read, desperate for her presence even if she refused to acknowledge him. The silence was finally broken by a threat neither of them anticipated. Victor Vance had not been idle. Still stinging from his humiliation at the gala, Victor had hired his own investigators. He did not discover the true identity of Clara, but he discovered something equally damaging. During a tense confrontation in the underground parking garage of Thorne Global, Victor cornered Clara. He held up a thick envelope containing audio recordings of Elias and Clara discussing the financial terms of their fake engagement. Victor smiled, his eyes cold and triumphant. He told Clara that the recordings would be sent to the press and the merger committee in 24 hours, unless she publicly broke the engagement and accused Elias of emotional abuse, ruining the legacy of Elias forever. Clara stood frozen in the dim light of the garage, looking at the envelope that held the power to destroy Elias. She had spent her entire life waiting for the opportunity to see Elias Thorne lose everything. Victor was handing her the exact vengeance she had always wanted on a silver platter. But, as she thought about Elias, about the quiet cups of coffee and the unexpected moments of genuine care behind his cold exterior, she realized with terrifying clarity that she no longer wanted to destroy him. She wanted to save him. Clara did not take the envelope. She looked at Victor Vance with a calm, pitying expression that made the older man falter. She told him he was playing a dangerous game, turned on her heel and walked directly to the private elevator. She rode it to the top floor, her heart pounding against her ribs. When she pushed open the heavy oak doors of Elias Thorne's office, he looked up, the familiar mask of cold indifference firmly in place. But Clara did not give him time to build his walls. She walked straight to his desk and told him everything. She told him about Victor, the recordings and the ultimatum. Elias stood slowly, the anger in his eyes not directed at her, but at the man who had dared to threaten her. He asked her why she was telling him, why she was not using this perfect opportunity to finish the vengeance she had started. Clara looked into his eyes and confessed the truth that had been tearing her apart. She told him that she could not destroy the man who had stayed awake all night just to bring her coffee, the man who was trying so hard to be better than the legacy his father had left behind. The heavy, suffocating silence that had plagued them for a week finally broke. Elias crossed the room, pulling her into his arms. It was not a calculated move for the cameras. It was a desperate, grounding embrace, a silent promise that they were in this together. The next morning, the grand ballroom of the Thorne Global building was packed with reporters, board members, and investors. Victor Vance stood near the podium, looking incredibly pleased with himself. He was waiting for Clara to step up to the microphones and deliver the fatal blow to the career of Elias Thorne. When Elias and Clara walked into the room together, their hands tightly intertwined, Victor's smug smile faltered. Elias stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone. He announced that before they discussed the European merger, there was a matter of internal corporate integrity to address. Elias signaled the audiovisual team. The massive screens behind the podium flared to life, but they did not show financial projections. Instead, the clear, undeniable audio of Victor Vance echoing through the underground parking garage played over the surround sound speakers. The entire ballroom listened in stunned silence as Victor attempted to blackmail Clara, threatening to ruin the company unless she destroyed Elias. The color completely drained from Victor's face. He tried to run toward the exit, but corporate security was already waiting. Elias calmly looked at the board of directors sitting in the front row and asked for an immediate vote of no confidence. Within 60 seconds, Victor Vance was stripped of his shares, expelled from the board, and escorted out of the building to the flashing cameras of the very press he had tried to manipulate. With the threat eliminated, Elias and Clara returned to the penthouse, the silence now comfortable and warm. Elias walked over to his safe, retrieved a thick leather folder, and placed it gently in Clara's hands. She opened it, her breath catching in her throat. Inside were the original deeds, patents, and property rights of Hayes Financial, painstakingly untangled from the Thorne empire. Elias looked at her, his voice rough with emotion, and told her that he could not rewrite the past, but he could give her back her future. He asked for her forgiveness, not with empty words, but with the restoration of her family's legacy. Clara pulled him down for a kiss, pouring all her relief and newfound love into the embrace, finally letting go of the ghosts that had haunted her. The seasons changed, bringing a new era to the city. A year later, the brass sign outside the newly renovated corporate headquarters did not just bear the name Thorne Global. It proudly displayed the newly minted partnership of Thorne and Hayes Financial. Clara sat behind her own massive oak desk, reviewing the final details of the European merger that had finally gone through, this time on their own terms. When Elias walked into her office, he did not knock. He simply leaned against the doorframe, a genuine, easy smile on his face that was entirely reserved for her. He told her it was time to go home. Clara closed her laptop, walked into his arms, and knew that she had not just reclaimed her family name. She had built a new one, grounded in love, trust, and a partnership that no amount of money could ever buy. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear a good story of love and redemption. Subscribe to the channel to follow the next stories. We will see you next time.